this episode of the Business Communicators.
But when you feel like you've got to make a statement because you're going to be a part of the conversation that you're not really, you haven't been a part of, so you can't have it effectively, and nobody believes you.
You're listening to the Business Communicators. And now your hosts, Austin Stanton and Hattie Horn.
Welcome to Season 4, Episode 20 of the Business Communicators, the number one podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. And again, that's a verifiable fact. My name is Austin Stanton, joined alongside my co-host, Hattie Horn. Hattie, Thomas is not here this week, which I think is fine. He's in Lubbock, Texas, cheering on his Red Raiders and their new football coach against the University of Houston Cougars. So hopefully Thomas comes back happy. If not, I think the city of Houston would be happier that the game went well. But before we get into anything, we're going to be joined by Kim Davis shortly, who is the president and chief strategist at the KV company. But Hattie, how's it going? It's been a while.
It has been. I've been missing you guys. And I'm so glad that you guys to see you. And I miss Thomas a little, but don't tell him.
He won't listen. It's fine. We can talk about him right now.
Because, you know, we get on our chats and we get to talking about different things and everything. And I say, you know what? Sometimes he was on the plane and I was like, what? He's missing in this spirited conversation. What's wrong with that? But oh, well, he'll be back and we'll be on him.
Yeah, I thought it was great when we were talking, pre-show. You're like, what is he doing in Lubbock?
And
like,
why?
They have a reason for it.
Who
And that's a
goes to
great
Lubbock?
point. If you've ever been to Lubbock, you're probably wondering why would you go there willfully? But Thomas did go to Texas Tech. I mean, we all make poor life decisions, and Thomas did that for 4 years. So
Yeah, of
just my
course.
thought. I mean, at least we have pride for our schools, Hattie. I mean,
That's right. PVU. Who you rooting for?
oh, you can see the Baylor helmets behind me. So
Absolutely.
embarrassed.
Yeah. I wear my purple. And
I've
gold.
got a little gold on. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but
Absolutely. Well, let's get into it.
yeah, let's do it. So really quickly for our listeners, we want to remind you to follow us on all our social media platforms. Just search at Biz Communicator. You can also visit our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guest this week. We've got Kim Davis, and if you're from Houston, you probably recognize Kim. She's been a long-standing member of the community. She was the vice president of external relations for Super Bowl 38. Does a great job with her company and has the Chalk Talk series, which I love. And when Hattie actually mentioned Kim, I was like, yeah, that sounds exactly like someone that I would want to talk to, because that's exactly what I like to do. So Kim, thank you so much for joining us on the Business Communicators this week.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I guess for our listeners, tell them a little about yourself. I mean, I know you've worked in news, you've worked in journalism. How did you get to where you are today?
So you're right. I have worked in news and journalism around the country. I've been in mostly television for probably, I want to say 30 years. And I want your audience to know I started when I was 12. Okay, if you're doing the math. So,
it's impressive.
so
I think that's the most impressive thing about you, to be honest.
Just so that we're clear. And yeah, I moved around the country a lot. I came back to Houston. Houston is my home. I'm a Houston native. I'm a Texas A&M graduate. So, I am an Aggie. But I moved around the country quite a bit. Television requires that. And so I came back home in 2002 as vice president of Super Bowl 38, which was the 04 game. And after that, I wanted to stay in Houston. So I technically started my business then, but I really just did contract television work, some sideline games for NBC, college games. And then about 2 years after that, I went to Channel 2 and took a position there, had a show called Beyond the Headlines, and was a part of the senior management team. And I did that for almost 6 years. And then I was like, this isn't really what I want to do long term. And I don't want to keep moving around the country. So I said, you know what? If I can't make a place for myself with my body of work, then I should just stay here. And I was like, not an option. I'm going to leave. And I did. And so I didn't have a great plan. I'm going to be really honest about it. I went to the obvious thing for me to do initially was media training and media coaching, because that's my wheelhouse. And I've done that before. And I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. So even though I've had jobs for a really long time, I always did something else. And that's really how I got into my own business. And I thought, because here's a question I asked myself. what is the job, if you could design it, that you want? Where is it? And it didn't exist. So I said, then I have to create it. So I started my company, and that's where my company has evolved to be, is the job that didn't exist anyplace else. And plus, I didn't have to ask somebody to hire me. It was really cool.
I love that because, I look back at my career and, I'm a political science major. I got my start working in sports. But you never know like where your paths and your skill sets are going to take you. And sometimes you have to have that creative outlet to go after what you want. And, as a little kid growing up in Houston as well, I wanted to be Milo Hamilton, like listening to him
Ah,
on the radio. Like I was that nerd that, we didn't have cable TV. So I would like listen to him broadcast the games and like keep score in my scorebook.
yes,
So that's a little
yes,
inside baseball for our listeners. But I knew that with a corporate job, it didn't make sense to, pursue the sports path. So I started a podcast. That's how I got into podcasting, sports, politics, pop culture. Did some high school football broadcasting, college baseball broadcasting, and it was a way for me to channel that, creativity. And now I get to, sit down and co-host a show with people like Hattie, and it's awesome.
yeah,
It's so interesting. What you're saying, we all have very, very diverse background, because I'm a
Mhm.
theater major, and I went to
Wow.
Prairie View A&M, PV. But one of the really coolest things, I met Kim when she was working on Super Bowl 38, and that was at the time a one-person job, and Kim was
Yeah.
doing everything. And I told her when I was asking her to join, I still have your note that you wrote to me
That's
Oh,
awesome.
wow.
when it ended.
Yes.
And I still have my lunch over. And I thought about it. I said, you know what? If I want to talk to a storyteller,
Yeah.
I want to talk to Kim. And one of my first questions I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what makes a really good story and storyteller from your perspective?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it is one that is just authentic, right? Because that's what people connect to, and being able to share whatever it is in a way that is authentic to the person telling the story. So I can't tell an effective story the way you tell it, because that's not who I am. So what is it? And I have to figure out what is it that makes it interesting. And it's really a conversation. And if you have a conversation, instead of I'm stating these facts and I'm letting you know these things, or I'm going to interview you, and you make it a conversation, and you think about it, if I'm telling a story on television, I'm having a conversation with the audience, and they're tuning in and watching me. And so just like I'm talking right now, that's how I'm going to tell my story on television. If I'm talking about something on my podcast or something that's audio, I'm going to have a conversation like I would, like I'm having it right now. So I think the best part of um, a storyteller is one that is how you deliver it, but finding it is what I used to say to people when I was in management, and sometimes when I have clients, is pick 3 points and say goodnight.
Mhm.
Okay. You try to put too much in a story and people check out. I don't know what she's talking about. I'm just sitting here. So pick 3 points and say goodnight. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And don't try to tell it all in one story. You can tell another story later. And I think if people thought about that, it could help them with their storytelling.
I think sometimes like conversations like that feel forced, right? If you don't have
Mhm.
those 3 points, or if you're so reliant on sticking to the script, like it doesn't seem genuine. And I think people can see
Yeah.
through that. I mean, how do you know this? I mean, when we were working together in the past, whenever we would do like video assignments, executives would ask, can we have a teleprompter? And my thought was
Mhm.
always no.
Right.
I preferred it if you got to ask the questions, Hattie, or I got to ask the questions, and then we just edit from there, because I feel like you get a more genuine conversation and it feels more authentic. And I think that's one of the reasons why someone like a Joe Rogan is so successful, regardless of what you think about him. He gets 10 to
Hmm.
15 million people that listen to his podcast every single day, because it's 3 hours of unscripted conversation. And I think that is what we're missing so much today as not only communicators, but people.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? You're absolutely right. We all want to be the authority, and I always
Mhm.
tell people, let stuff breathe. If you come on my show, I invite you because you're bringing something I want to get from you. I don't need to out talk you there's no measurement of, well, if I say more, then I'm the authority. And I think
Yeah.
we're kind of stuck in the being the authority. No, have a conversation. And your expertise comes in putting it together and getting the right people in the room or on the mic or in front of the camera, and be okay with that. And it doesn't have to be scripted. Here's what I say about teleprompters. Most people can't read from them because it sounds like
True.
I'm reading from a
True.
teleprompter. Like, I can read from one, but I'm trained to do that. I'm not
Yeah.
a big teleprompter fan. Give me a couple bullets if I need it. And because I've always really produced my own stuff. So because if you're relying on this mechanical thing and something happens, you can't catch up. You're like, I saw somebody on a station I won't name do it this morning. I'm like, first of all, she wasn't connected to the copy. Be connected to whatever the story is you're telling. Be connected to that information, right? So if something changes, something malfunctions, you know it because you're connected.
Yep.
I look at it like this: being on a live shot, covering a story, and what caused the wreck, whatever the story is. Well, I don't know yet, right? I just got here. Anchor knows that. And so what I would say is, you know what? There's let me tell you what we do know. Yeah, I don't have to. Well, let me think. No, I don't know what they told me. This was really what I want to say, and you knew I didn't know, right? That's what I want to say. But what I would say, you know what? Let me tell you what we do know, and here's some things we're going to find out. And we find that out, we're going to come. We're going to let you know, and we'll let the audience know. It's really simple. We overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be that hard, and that's what I want people to know is it doesn't have to be that hard. And people are very forgiving if you own it and say, well, actually, rather. We're human. We may say something that we didn't mean to say, as slip of the tongue. Just correct it in the moment and be okay with it. And the audience is very forgiving about that.
It shows relatability.
Absolutely.
That they can identify with you. We all make mistakes.
Which is so interesting is that there are a lot, now I don't want to say a lot, there are a few companies who are really big companies, I'm not going to go into any names, who are not really good at talking about themselves. They are so overscripted. They have media people who are coaching them to death, and yet they still fall flat and they lose. And then they're scratching their heads later on as to why they couldn't connect with the audience. And what would you tell, and this question is for you, Kim, what would you tell a person who works in corporate that is someone who coaches business and to that executive who still doesn't get it?
Well,
what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would first look at the way the person's coaching them. My approach to media training is very different from many companies that do media training. Maybe because I spent most of my career in the media and being on both sides. But I think if you make it very technical and you give them so much information, it's hard to really retain it and do anything with it, right? Each time you have a session, let them have, you want your client to walk away with at least one win. Like, I'm leaving this session, which first of all, should not be all day. I'm very opposed to that. I'm leaving it with a win, and this is something that I can do and I can implement. Let's start there. And don't help them understand that transparency is really the future. Like, we've always said it, but the future of communications and effective communication is being transparent. I'm not saying give up all the company secrets or get yourself into legal problems, but we're so busy trying to hide it, and we don't want to just, you take all the air out of somebody's, balloon when you just say, hey, listen, this is what happened. This is what it is, and this is what we're doing about it. And that may seem like, oh, we can't do that. Well, that's when the executive can't be themselves because they're so busy trying to stand up and be this authority and not give away too much. And that's what I see with a lot of media coaching. All the technical pieces about how it works, most of them don't need that. Now, if you've got a client that is, sometimes you have to spend some time with them and know who they are and know what it takes to get to them, because you're really coaching them, like you're coaching their a football game. You've got to know your players and you've got to know what resonates with them. There is no one size fits all.
Yep.
I don't have a one size fits all program. I'm going to meet with you. I'm going to get a sense for who you are and understand your voice and then help you deliver your voice in a way that is effective and concise and productive. I have these 3 things I like to say: be bold, be brilliant, and be brief. Get to the point.
I am kind of curious, you mentioned transparency, and I think that is incredibly important. And we've seen this shift of CEOs becoming more vulnerable, talking
Mhm.
about issues that impact them. But at the same time, we've seen, some CEOs only comment on issues that impact their company directly. And then we see some trying to comment on societal issues, whether it's in their country or not. Almost every time an issue comes up, they feel like they have to take a
Yeah.
stand on everything. What's your take on that? What is the right balance?
You know what? It's so interesting that you say that. I remember, and we'll use the George Floyd
Hmm.
murder, right? After that, everybody wanted to make a statement. And what I would say to people is, if you weren't making comments about issues of diversity or police, violence or overstep or over you, then don't feel like you have to make a statement. If you're not doing anything in the space, just sit back and be quiet.
Yeah.
And what you can do is, if you feel like in your company we should be doing something differently, then start there. Do the thing, do the work, and then that story would tell itself, right? But when you feel like you've got to make a statement because you want to be a part of a conversation that you haven't been a part of, so you can't have it effectively, and nobody believes you.
Yeah.
That's really where people get it wrong. So you just got to be honest with who you are. And if you say, you know what, we should have been doing more, then that's what you say. You know what, we should have been doing more. So I don't have a whole lot to say about this thing, but what I can tell you that is over at company Kim Davis, moving forward, we're going to look at trying to do ABC. That's authentic, that's believable, and that's not me trying to hop in on the moment.
And it's not just talking about it, but being about it, showing about
Mhm.
it. And I think Hattie and I have mentioned this exact scenario a few times on the podcast. But the company that we were at before, after the George Floyd situation, I personally feel that it was similar to what you were just describing.
Mhm.
And they had a company-wide town hall with the CEO and the chairman of the board, both European. And so there wasn't anyone that could directly relate to the situation. And the chairman of the board during that conversation made a point saying at the end, I think it's important to remember that all lives matter. And I was like, oh my gosh, like in his mind, I think he meant
He
it
meant
with good
well.
intentions, but
He
he
had
didn't
good
he
intentions.
didn't have the
Yeah.
local knowledge that you can't say that in a corporate town hall meeting. And so I don't know. I think the person delivering the message is also incredibly important.
It is incredibly important. And you know what I think of, and I use this in a lot of my training. I show this clip. It's older now, but I use it. Remember when the Starbucks had the issue in Philadelphia where the employer, called the cops?
Yeah.
And what the CEO did before the work they did was shutting down all the stores and doing that. He went on and did an interview, and he basically said, "Listen, the buck stops with me, so I'm responsible. This is not who we want to be, and this is what we're going to do." He didn't say, well, he didn't make any excuses. He owned it, and he did something about it, and then people respected him. That's really all you can do.
Hmm.
But it's all the other stuff. If he had said, well, we've done, A, B, C, D, and E, well, that has nothing to do with this today. So what he did
It
was
sounds defensive.
he kind of took the wind out of the sails. It sounds defensive. So people who were going to attack his position, what do you attack? He's just said it's on me. I'm the CEO, so everything flows up to me, and I've got to do something to make sure this doesn't happen again. And this is what I'm going to do. That was like brilliant to me.
Exactly. I'm going to shift to social media platforms, particularly LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn has become a place that has expanded beyond just professional accolades, promote whatever, people posting for jobs. It's become a conversation piece that includes also whether it's discrimination, race, people being vulnerable, talking about personal health issues, those kinds of things. What do you think about that, how it's evolved as a
Mhm.
platform? Do you think it's positive? Do you think it's negative? How do you think people are doing? Because you're seeing where people are saying anything now. They're either offended or they're pleased with it, they agree with it, or it's become this political hotbed. What's your take
So,
on it?
so my take is that LinkedIn, so if you go back to 2016 when Microsoft bought LinkedIn for like $26 billion, the platform started to change and evolve. It evolved more during COVID to become more of a B2B kind of platform instead of just where you go get jobs. And it is a place where people establish their thought leadership, their expertise. And so, just like any other platform, there are people who get it wrong. And so it's important to know how to use the platform. So I think it's positive how it's being used because people are getting opportunities for LinkedIn, whether it's there's jobs, but for business owners, there are business opportunities. Or someone reached out to me recently about speaking because I speak. They found me on LinkedIn, so it is definitely the business professionals Google. And if you keep that in mind, that's how you should use it. And people have to determine they need a strategy, Hattie. I'm always saying we talk about a strategy for development and for marketing. Well, you need a communication strategy, and social media is just one of the tactics in the strategy. How do you use the platform? Which platforms are you going to use? How many? And what's your plan? What's the end game for it? And if you approach it that way, then I think you'll be fine. But I think it's great to see more activity there because the conversations, for the most part, are elevated, and people that are speaking about things are speaking from a level of authority and expertise. And so I would much rather hear some of that from LinkedIn and, than I would sometimes maybe on Instagram. And I like Instagram, I use it, but
Mhm.
LinkedIn has a very different place. And so it's really about understanding how to use it and how to build your profile so it does and says who you want to represent and what you want people to know about you and your business, craft, interest. LinkedIn is a great place to do it.
Exactly.
I'm going to share this, Hattie. I shared it with you in the chat, but you just mentioned Instagram, Kim, and I used to love Instagram so much, right? Because it was a place where you could go to and see, your friends' photos, and I love photography. I love sharing travel
Mm,
photos and sunset photos, all that good stuff, and Instagram's gotten away from that. They've because of TikTok, they've noticed their market share isn't as strong and, have shifted more to video. And I think that's the trend with everything is video. And
mhm,
so I understand, like, as a business, you got to make money. Ad sales are important. But I decided to like audit my own Instagram feed.
mhm,
And I only follow 334 accounts, not many, but I looked at the first 100 posts within my feed just to kind of see what was out there. Of the 212 of the accounts that I follow, 212 are personal or friend accounts. So about 64%. Of the total accounts I follow, about 122 I would classify as brand or influencer accounts.
mhm,
After auditing those posts, 24 posts or 24% of the posts that I saw in my feed were ads.
mm,
62.5% of the ads did not contain video. When removing ads from the count, reels and video accounted for 55.2% of all posts. When including ads, reels, and photos accounted for a 50-50 split. 2.6 of the accounts that I follow are affiliated with Barstool Sports. However, they
mm.
accounted for 21% of all posts in my feed, including
Mm.
ads. And then only 10.5% of the non-ad posts that I saw were from personal or friend accounts. So I thought that was just kind of a interesting kind of audit. And I don't know, like,
Yeah.
are we losing that personal connection with social media? And is maybe LinkedIn the only way that we can have that personal connection anymore?
It's interesting. I met with some potential clients on yesterday about really helping them with their LinkedIn. Getting their profile kind of a makeover and creating a strategy for them to move forward with their business. And they had been like, we don't like it, social media, because what we see a lot is like lawyers that are posting checks. Well, those aren't. And that she's like, that's not who we are. It What you can't do is control what's happening on the platforms, right? I heard a comedian say the other day, he said Instagram and social media has made people stars and boosted their business without them really having the expertise or the wherewithal that they show you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what I say is don't worry about it because that's not your market, that's not your audience. You still have to go and make sure that your message is clear. So the
Mhm.
a long answer to your question is they're all just changing and
Mhm.
they become a place where people are doing business. Some people are still just having it's just for fun. But I think the best mix, if you want to use it for business, is that people get to know you because, what do you say? People do business with who they like.
Yep.
Who do they like and know? And so, what do I know about you? If what I know is that you're always trying to sell me something, I'm not really tuning into that. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, and this happens, and you're always sending me a picture, I don't know you, right? Don't do that. Like, stop doing these cold calls on LinkedIn. I didn't
Oh my
ask you
God.
for an
Thank you, Kim.
estimating
Mm.
Thank
call.
you. Thank you.
It's not proper etiquette,
Yep.
and it's going to make me disconnect. You can disconnect with people on LinkedIn. Don't worry about the numbers. If people are bombarding you, if I reach out for a connection on LinkedIn, I'm going to send you a note. Hey, Hattie, we both know Jackie Martin, and I would love to connect with you. Or I'm not just spamming you to get a bunch of numbers and then I'm going to go and send you a bunch of sales calls. You still have to, on LinkedIn, develop relationships for the platform to work the way it can work.
Yeah.
So the people who aren't using it correctly, they're just doing it's a numbers game like it is oftentimes in sales. And I just wouldn't worry about it because everything's kind of going that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And the thing is with me, because I do demand, I get a lot of sales and I reserve the right to ignore.
Ignore and unfollow.
That
Stop.
too.
Like
Block,
it's like I love
delete,
it when you get
whatever.
the emails or messages and they're like, did you see the previous 5 emails that I've sent? And it's like, yes, I didn't respond for a
Hello.
reason.
Hey, I just want to make sure you saw the email I sent you the other day.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh, I'll send you $100 gift card if you respond to this. No.
I haven't gotten those.
I did get one of those. I'll just send you this if you let me know. And I was like, I don't even like that. I don't even like that business. So no,
Yeah,
I'm not
it's like
responding to that.
make it 250 and make it Amazon and we'll talk.
I'm not even gonna do that. I won't. I
Because
will
then I'm
not
like, I'm
entertain.
kind of skeptical. Like, is this some kind of hoax? I'm gonna click on it.
Yeah,
It's gonna
exactly.
take over my computer.
Well, it's just like text. Now a lot of sales and marketing have moved to text, but you don't know who it really is. Just like political campaigns, they moved to text. For example, Beto O'Rourke. I'm going to be in South Texas and want to know if you're going to sign up. And I'm like, well, they're not doing this right. Can't they tell I'm not going to be in that particular town?
Can't they tell that you're 200 miles away?
Right.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, that is the frustrating thing. So I consider myself a moderate. I vote for both Republicans and Democrats. Actually, I haven't voted for like a Republican since like 2012, but I'm on an email list or not an email list, but like a text list where my name is on both DNC and RNC distribution list, and that is like the worst thing ever. So my recommendation for you is don't be a moderate voter. Don't think about each issue that's important to you, because if you do and you do vote for both parties, you're going to end up on the spam list.
Well, I
Even
voted
worse.
for one over another, and I get texts from both too.
It's horrible.
I get those too. And so I have because I get so many emails, and I do run a business and two businesses actually, and I need to be able to find my emails, and I also have some personal relationships. Imagine that. I just have to start unfollowing. How do I unsubscribe? I'm very good at that. Unsubscribe.
Me too.
No, I don't want this. And so it's annoying. It really is.
From a sports perspective, how do you think the Texans are going to do? What's the atmosphere like, if you don't mind my asking?
So I will tell you, I've covered the team for a long time, and it is a very different atmosphere. It has to do a lot, I think, with the head coach, Lovie Smith. They are, I was a little late getting to you guys today to start this podcast because they had, getting ready to start the season. They had, and head coach Lovie Smith has his beard, and beards are kind of a big thing now, right, with a lot of men. So they had a little event, and they had some of the barbers that cut, the players' hair and coach hair, and they had him come to the stadium in a club level, and we got a chance to, talk to him while they were getting this done. Even the owner, Cal McNair, got his mustache kind of, cleaned up. And so what they're trying to do is they knew they have to go create an environment that's a little more friendly, right? And so that's what they're doing with the media. But even like at camp, at training camp, one day Cal was making hamburgers for fans. And so the atmosphere is different. There is some excitement. I don't think anyone thinks this team's headed to the Super Bowl this year, but there is excitement about the season starting. And that wasn't the case this time last year, quite frankly.
Right.
And it's kind of fun to be around. So to answer your other part of the question, how will they do? I don't know. I'm not great with predictions, but I will tell you they're going to be a lot better. In terms of games, wins and losses, I'm going to say, unlike the pundits who are picking them to win 4 or 5 games, I say they're at least a 7 or 8 win team. And it just really depends on how the ball falls and how good will Davis Mills be. Not that it's all on him, but there's going to be some things this year that are different. They're going to be much better against the run, much better against the run. They're going to be better running the ball. They were the worst in the league last year. Those 2 things alone will change the trajectory of this football team's future. And they bought into Lovie Smith. They've bought into the culture, if you will, of what's happening with the Texans. And it's a different space. They're building, right? They know that when they would love the stadium to be packed on Sundays, but Houston's a market where people aren't going to show up until you gain their trust again, and that's done by winning on the field. But it's a very different feel covering the team now than it has been in recent years, for sure.
Switching gears to the new podcast, the Sports Communicators. I do like your take. As someone who does have a sizable investment in the Texans winning over 4.5 games this year, I would like to see the 6 to 7 mark. And I do think Davis Mills has a lot of upside. I will say that the guy that I'm really excited about for the Texans is Jalen Petrie. And if you're not familiar with his story, to our listeners, he went to my alma mater, Baylor University, and he is a legend. He is one of the most likable human beings that I've interacted with, and he was part of the final, I guess, recruiting class under Art Briles. So Art Briles had one of the top 10 classes. Petrie was kind of an underrated recruit, and he was the only person that stuck around from that recruiting class. Everyone else left, went to different schools, and so he was the one. And nobody was really sure what they would get from him. And he became like an All-American at Baylor, won the Big 12 championship, won the Sugar Bowl, and then gets drafted by his hometown team in the 2nd round. I mean, it's an incredible story, and he's going to be starting on Sunday. And I hope he wins Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's my hope for him. He's an incredible
Let me tell
person.
you, he's impressive. He is impressive. He's been impressive throughout off season, mini camp, training camp, preseason. But I'm going to give you another name to watch out for, and that's Damian Pierce. He's a running back.
He's on my fantasy team.
Is he? Well, that's a good choice. I'm telling you, he's a 4th round pick out of the University of Florida, and he came in camp, and he has been the person that you've seen in those preseason games from day one. He is excited about being there. He's hungry. He's a sponge for information, and he's really talented. And the line is better. They got somebody from my alma mater at A&M. They got Kenyon Green. They drafted in the 1st round as an offensive lineman. He won't probably start this week because he was injured a bit at camp. So he's kind of working his way up, but he's really talented.
And he's another local guy. Went to Atascocita.
He's another local guy. Absolutely. So I just think it's some excitement, and there's some young guys who to keep your eye on. Jalen Petrie is one you mentioned, and definitely a guy like Damian Pierce, who is super exciting because we haven't had really exciting running back in a while
since Arian Foster, probably
Arian Foster. We were talking about that. Yeah, I mean, Alfred Blue had some flashes, but that he wasn't an Arian Foster kind of back. I mean, what Damian Pierce could be to this team does put you in that mindset. So we'll see.
Yeah, I just hope that this team does well because the city of Houston deserves a good football team. And
we're not gonna hope, we're gonna claim it.
Hattie, I know you're a Cowboys fan, but
no, hey. But I will say this: I was really excited. I was looking at cron.com and I saw the picture, and what was amplified was every major sports team here in Houston is helmed by a Black coach.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
May not be exciting to some, but that's exciting to me.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
I love how Lovey Smith was the one who instigated it or initiated the photograph, which I thought was really historical. And it is historical, and it is very cool.
It is very cool, you know, and there's some of us who talk about it, and they're all great guys. You know, Lovie
Yeah.
Smith is a great guy with a great body of work. How do you not love Dusty Baker? I
Oh
was
my
a Dusty
God, I
Baker
love
fan
him.
before
Right.
I ever met him. He's such a, and he is that guy. He's such a cool guy. He's got such a body of work. He's a Hall of Famer. I hope
Exactly.
the Astros win the Super Bowl, get a World Series chip this
For
year,
him. Do it
not
for
just for
Dusty.
them, but for Dusty.
For Dusty.
And then you know, Steven Silas has put together a great coaching staff. But what he's been able to get from these young guys, think about it. The average age last year was like 19, you know, of his starting lineup. And even though the team had no shot of getting the postseason, I mean, they didn't even win 20 games last year. The last game of the season, they played just as hard as they did in game one. That speaks to the character of those young players, but it also speaks to the coach and what they think of him. And so the future's bright. I just hope all the owners let these guys do what they need to do. Because
Yep.
I think we're going to be talking about some champions for a while.
Yeah.
Indeed.
It was fun watching Jalen Green down the stretch. My gosh, that kid is talented, and he can
He's a
hop
star.
out of the gym. It's golly. And I love the Dusty Baker comment. Like, I don't know if you guys heard this, but when he had COVID,
about him not getting to watch the game.
Yeah. So Hattie, I don't know if you heard this. He could not watch the game because it was on like Peacock, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
Right.
So he was like, oh well, I'm quarantined in the hotel. I'm gonna watch a Bob Marley documentary on Netflix. And so he like he talked about it on local radio. He's like, yeah, probably the first like head coach or manager to ever like not watch his team play and watch a Bob Marley documentary.
He told us that when they got back from that road trip, they were playing in Cleveland, right? And so he was in the hotel because he was diagnosed with COVID on the road. And he said, yeah, I couldn't find it. So I just watched. He said it was the Bob Marley documentary. He said it was really great.
It is good.
I really enjoyed it. But he
I've seen it.
watched his team, but he goes, I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Well, Kim, it's been an absolute blast to have you on the podcast this week. And for our listeners out there that maybe want to learn more about you, the work that you do, maybe catch an episode of Chalk Talk. What is the best way for them to find you and learn more about you?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. I really appreciate it. And I throw in sports to all things. So thank you for indulging me. You can find me online. I'm Kim Y. Davis on most places. On Instagram, it's Kim Y. Davis Media. But if you go to YouTube, Kim Y. Davis, and LinkedIn, Kim Y. Davis, and Facebook and Twitter, Kim Y. Davis. And that way you can keep up with what I'm doing. And my website is kimydavis.com. So my show's every Tuesday. It's live. And then it becomes a podcast. So it'll live in perpetuity on all the podcast platforms. So check me out. Let me hear from you. I'd love it. And again, thank you guys so much for having me today.
Well, it was a ton of fun and definitely our pleasure. And we'll link to all of Kim's information in the show notes below. So just scroll down, subscribe, follow her, and rate her 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That really goes a long way in helping out. But Kim, thanks so much for joining us this week.
All right. Thanks. You guys have a great rest of your show and a great weekend.
All right. Thanks, Kim. Take care.
Thank you.
Well, Hattie, that was a ton of fun. My gosh.
Yes,
we need to add a 4th co-host.
Don't, you'll scare Thomas. Thank you.
Or we could just replace Thomas. Thomas, you're not picking up your game.
Bet you won't leave us again.
I do like the sports commentary, because that was a fun thing about like when I hosted the Weekly Brew podcast. Like we had like 30,000-40,000 listeners a week, and we were able to like, we had like a regular correspondent from the NFL Network that was on our show talking football, and we were able to get like Tim Kirkshin to join us to do a Game 5 World Series preview back in 2017. It was so much fun to be able to do that. And I don't know, like I said, I grew up a nerd. I wanted to do sports radio, and now I podcast and work in corporate comms. So.
Well, just think you got to do a little bit of that today.
And it makes it fun. Yeah, no, it
You're
reinvigorated
welcome.
me. Yeah, and I don't think Kim knows this, but when Hattie and I were texting about, where we should film, like we've been always talking about doing like live in-person shows, because we haven't done one since, the onset of COVID. We're like, we need to like record at Kirby Ice House or something and do, just a live show. So Kim, when we have you on for a second time, let's have beers and talk shop. I think that'd be a ton of fun. But
Indeed it would. Yes.
Yeah. All right, Hattie, any parting words before we close out the show? Anything that you want to note, takeaways, or anything like that?
I love our conversation today. And, my takeaway is, I love the fact that she gets it. Kim gets it. You got to be genuine. You got to be authentic when you're communicating. And I hope our listeners really get that and have a strategy, a good strategy, and not be tactical.
I think also be yourself.
Yeah.
Don't try to be someone that you're not. We can get kind of washed away with what is person X doing, what is person Y doing. This influencer is doing that on LinkedIn or Twitter, Facebook, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, be yourself. Don't try to emulate someone. I mean, you got to where you are because of who you are. And in
some cases, don't be too much of yourself, because it could get you in trouble depending on what you're doing.
Also good advice. Well, we hope that you all enjoyed this episode of the Business Communicators podcast. And I think, Hattie, that's probably a wrap on season 4 of the show. But be sure to follow our work. Just search @BizCommunicator on all the social media platforms. And also be sure to follow our guest this week, Kim Davis. We'll link to all of her information and her podcast, Talk, LinkedIn, all that good stuff in the show notes below. But on behalf of my co-host, Hattie Horn, and our one who's lost right now in Lubbock, Texas, Thomas Bain. My name's Austin Staton. We'll see you for season 5. Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.